The Dance of Destiny. With Commorragh erupting into bedlam, Yvraine joined forces with the Eldar Corsairs that had once been hers to command. Their ship did not escape the spinned ports unchallenged, however. None escaped the Supreme Overlord of the Dark City without paying a high cost. As the Lanathrialle's sails caught the solar winds of Commorragh's stolen suns, parotia of Vect's shardcraft peeled away from the Corespur dictrict's dock spars. They came alongside Yvraine's voidship as the Corsair of those captains she had sought in Sec Maegra shimmered on the false horizon. They were tantalizingly close, but not close enough to intervene. A communiqué was sent, ordering the Corsairs to turn Yvraine over to the Kabal of the Black Heart. The choice was stark: either try to escape and be shot to pieces in the skies above, or hand Yvraine over and risk a return to the growing chaos below. The Corsairs sought another path. It appeared by the progress they were heading for the arterial webway portal yawning wide over Commorragh, but that route was soon barred by Vect's nimble interceptors. It appeared by the progress they were heading for the arterial webway portal yawning wide over Commorragh, but that route was soon barred by Vect's nimble interceptors. Instead, as they came close to one of the minor portals through which only small frigates could pass, they steered at the harshest angle they could execute. Though Vect's blockade destroyed many of the East's ships with pinpoint fire, they could not halt the momentum of its massive capital ship. The Corsairs slammed the Lanathrialle's prow, bridge and all, straight into the portal. The rest of the spacecraft would not even come close to fitting through, however, sticking out like a great sword shoved into a scabbard made for a dagger. A dozen blinding explosions burst into dazzling profusion across the neck of the great ag ship as it ground into the spinned crescent of the webway gate. The metaphysical forces unleashed by the collision were so powerful they ravaged the Lanathrialle inside and out. Proud Corsairs were burned alive or sent ailing from the torn sides of the ag ship, tumbling into the eternal night of the Dark City to be blasted to atoms by the disintegrator fire of Vect's hunters. A moment later, the stricken corpse of the Lanathrialle was caught in the crossing beams of the Corespur's tractor pinces, slowly hauled from the burning webway gate to be caught, scoured of life as a lesson to those who would defy Vect. With the Supreme Overlord city shaking in the grip of a warp disjunction, Vect wanted nothing more than to punish the perpetrator of the carnage. He watched from the observation galleries of his oating fortress, but swallowed down a scream of rage and frustration as the prow of the vast void ship was drawn backward from the webway portal. It was all but intact, except for a perfectly circular hole cut in the vizier deck of the ship's elegantly tapering bridge. Vect did not need to wait for confirmation from his shadowy agents. Yvraine and her vanguard were gone, already lost in the labyrinth dimensions tunnels, as sure as the rest of the Corsair ag ship's crew would soon suffer an agonizing death in Raketh's hellish dungeons. In the webway, translucent passageways stretched before Yvraine as she and her blood brides darted from one vista of impossible architecture to another. The Crimson Stranger was close behind, his incubi in tow. With the demon invasion ravaging much of Commorragh, Vect would likely have 100 contingencies put in motion, but would still be sending his agents to retrieve them. The sacrifice of the Corsair ag ship had bought him a few critical terran hours, but that lead would be quickly eroded if the pursuers launched a mounted search party, or used esoteric means to cut him off. They had no option but to head deeper into the webway. The ribbed tunnels of the labyrinth dimension seemed to draw the trespassers onward, lambent pulses of light gliding alongside them with a hypnotic motion. Yvraine's vanguard, barely 50 strong, moved from wide arterial passageways to winding side passages and capillary tunnels that forced him to go in single file. The tunnels were dazzling and confusing to behold. Every unnatural angle and rune-sealed door reminded the trespassers that they did not belong there. All too often they felt eyes upon them, something staring intently at their intrusion, but the source they never found. The travelers were conscious that to stray from the relative safety of the arterial passageways into the long-abandoned capillary tunnels was to invite disaster. Denorian fiends, a motion-eating medusa, Commorragh predators and nests of Cycnering infested those forgotten reaches. When the strains of a bizarre, lilting song uttered through the tunnels, its tone mocking and unnatural, Yvraine feared something even worse. Much of the webway had been shattered by the fall of the Eldar, blasted apart by the devastating warp energies that had consumed the Eldar Empire of old. Those broken spars had been largely destroyed by Commorragh cauterization raids or sealed off by the ruined portals of the craft-worlders, for most led to the hellish dimension of the warp. In theory, the arterial passageways around Commorragh were safe, but since the fall, the galactic labyrinth had been a ruined mockery of its former grandeur. Only the laughing god Sigarash, the only one of the original Eldar pantheon of gods to truly survive the rise of Slaanesh, knew which parts were whole, and which led to the domain of the great enemy. Several of Yvraine's blood brides had begun to rage, complaining of the hunger gnawing inside them and testing the blades as they looked slyly at one another. Without the psychic sustenance of suffering, the Dark Eldar would slowly shrink into themselves until they became parched, ravening ghouls desperate to feast on emanations of negative emotion. Even the most beautiful witch would be reduced to a torrid hag over the course of a few empty solar nights. A voice in Yvraine's head laughed at the distress. It was that of a young male, quiet but cruel. The gladiatrix wondered if she had somehow absorbed the soul of the Girabat hellion she had slain. If so, she had kept the warrior's essence safe from the all-consuming desire of Slaanesh. If she could somehow master that process, or even teach it to others, she would have made a miraculous stride forward in the long battle for her race's salvation. It could allay the plight of the Dark Eldar and their endless soul hunger, but also the predicament of the craft-worlders, too. Should one individual be able to take the soul of another into themselves, he or she could act as a living refuge from she who thirsts. The Eldar would no longer need wastelands, nor the limbo of the infinity circuits. The more she dwelt on the idea, the more animated she became. Here was possibility, hope, perhaps. She strode purposefully on, possessed of such conviction that her fractious vanguard kept the peace. Further into the misty reaches of the webway they went, the unsettling song haunting the steps. As the time slid by, the cold and sterile tunnels gave way to utter anarchy of form. Yvraine's ragtag group ventured along spiring paths that wound around the inside of the tunnels, with the travelers walking on the walls, on ceilings, and on stairs as insubstantial as shadow yet capable of bearing the combined weight. Twisting deltas of passageways opened and narrowed once more, some opaque and humid, others made of crystal so transparent that a cosmos of swelling clouds and distant stars could be seen stretching into the void. The truth of what lay out there, in the twilight between reality and the warp, was so mind-boggling even an Eldar could not comprehend it. In some places the mind's eye translated the scene into an analogue of the physical galaxy writ in a dizzying profusion of colors and lights. In others, the skyscape was a collage of laughing faces, all blending and owing one into another to form a grotesque tableau that could forever scar the memory. All the while that strange skirling song haunted their every step. Yvraine had seen enough to know she was irrevocably lost. With no real destination in mind, she had bent her will to avoiding that which lay behind them, rather than that which was ahead. Her blood brides were now openly quarreling amongst themselves, their incendiary insults regarding each other's intimate practices giving way to spats of posturing and the rattling of blades. Ethria launched a tirade of invective concerning Vilya the Talon's ancestry, so imaginative and surreal were Vilya's counterclaims that even Yvraine found herself wide-eyed with amused surprise. Still, they were running out of time. With the Dark Eldar desperate to feed, it would not be long before their vicious bickering boiled over into a minor massacre. With the Dark Eldar desperate to feed, it would not be long before their vicious bickering boiled over into a minor massacre. About them, the walls of the webware glistened wetly, like the adanks of some living thing. They had come to a dead end. A portal lay at the cul-de-sac's center, the runes of warding upon its oval circumference smoking as if burned out no more than a matter of solar minutes ago. The skirling song sounded closer than ever, putting Yvraine's nerves on edge. There was no other way forward. She pushed through the shimmering quicksilver of the gate, her blood brides at her heels. A demented scene greeted her, an image from some insane artist's nightmare. 100 demets were dancing and frolicking with the corpses of Dark Eldar in the colors of Vect's own Kabal. The handmaidens of She Who Thirsts waltzed and span as if at a grand ball, each holding a deceased Kabalite in a lover's embrace. They were accompanied by a maddening artist's duet, the interweaving melodies played on the thigh bones of Eldar from before the fall. As they danced, the demets aid the ash from their victims with their razored claws, each gesture a languid caress that left the corpses dripping with gore. At the heart of it all was an elegant dancer holding the masks of tragedy and comedy on a long haft. The mask of Slaanesh told of Yvraine's IGHT by her besotted Esser's Lithagent, the veteran Sassaracin. At the heart of it all was an elegant dancer holding the masks of tragedy and comedy on a long haft. The mask of Slaanesh told of Yvraine's IGHT by her besotted Esser's Lithagent, the veteran Sassaracin. Yvraine's stomach churned, the panicked screaming of the Hellion soul ringing loud in her mind. Outnumbered twice over, she was about to order the retreat when she saw a tall, stately demet amongst the throng dancing ever swifter. Her spiraling pavane was somehow so entrancing Yvraine could not look away. She felt an unsettling peace settle over her, a suffocating blanket of apathy that made her eyelids droop. Around her, blood brides and incubi were slumping, sitting cross-legged, and lying on the oddly pulsing tunnel, or as they were taken by the unnatural malaise of slumber that washed over them like a wave. Vilya the Talon gave a small cry of despair, as plaintive as that of a dying swan, before lying down in a heap. Soon they would all become corpse puppets at a demonic revel. Suddenly, with jubilant cries, troop after troop of Harlequin warrior dancers vaulted down from the tunnel ceiling, tumbling from clouds of glittering mist one after another in sprays of luminescent diamonds. Yvraine felt a jolt of pure energy wake her from her trance. She had hoped that her vanguard's presence would pique the curiosity of Sigurach's warrior dance sooner or later, and their intervention could not have been better timed. She raised her husk blade by way of greeting, then strode forward and took the head from the nearest demet's neck. The dancing doyen at the heart of the demet horde pirouetted faster, an expression of pure fury on her grotesque face. She sprang at unnatural speed towards the crimson incubi nearby, her fellow demons crooning and shrieking in her wake. The mercenary bladesmen, the blood brides, and even some of the harlequins were caught in the grip of her deathly slumber curse. Even the visage had succumbed, holding his head as if in the grip of a raging migraine. Yvraine was already fighting hard against the hissing she-fiends. There was no way she could get past to aid her imperiled allies. As the mask of Slaanesh dashed over the slumped corpse of an incubus in the livery of the Cabal of the Black Heart, she found her legs hooked out from under her by the fallen warrior's clave. The incubus rose to his feet, laughing hollowly, his form shimmering as if caught in a heat mirage. He sloughed off the illusion altogether to leave a lithe, hooded harlequin in his place. A solitaire walker of the path of the damned. The mask of Slaanesh gave a cry of disbelief and angst, spinning to slash a claw at the solitaire's midriff. Her adversary was already moving, punching a monofilament wire into the mask's neck before cartwheeling away, greatcoat billowing, to land in a sprinter's crouch. A split second later, the harlequin launched forward like a living missile into the ranks of the demonettes. The solitaire shot from victim to victim so fast that it was impossible to trace him. The blur of his passage left explosions of purple ochre with every new kill. Yvraine and her blood brides, now free of the dance's spellbinding curse, plunged into the ranks of the angered Demettes with blades ashing. The fiendish handmaidens leered at the prospect of fresh meat and charged to meet them. At first the forces seemed evenly matched, blood was drawn on both sides. Even Yvraine took a shallow cut across the throat. It stung like fury but did not cut deep enough to do real harm. She spoke words of power, and thin tendrils of grey mist seeped from the gladiatrix's wound. The touch sapped the strength from the Demettes nearby and turned their unreal Escher lifeless grey. Yvraine frowned in consternation, but seeing an opportunity, pressed her assault. The fiendish handmaidens found a sadistic joy replaced by panic at the sight of Yvraine's soul magic. The fugitives and their harlequin allies were now fighting every bit as fast as the lithe, whip-thin demons, if not faster. Bloody throats were slashed, and slain demons dissipated in clouds of sickly pink mist. On the left flank, the incubi were reaping bloody vengeance with the claves. On the right, the illusory glamours of a harlequin shadow seer turned Demettes upon one another instead of their intended foes. With the Dark Eldar counter-assault on one side and the harlequin's killing spree on the other, the Slaneshi trap had been broken. The mask threw back her head and gave a horrendous scream. The sound was so loud it shattered a section of the webway wall behind her. A gale of psychic emanations roared into the tunnels, swelling into a tornado that carried the Demettes and the Queen away and out of sight in the space of a few terrifying moments. The Eldar fought to keep the footing, embedding the blades and fingernails in the psychoplastic crystal of the tunnel's walls. The solitaire strode through the gale as if it were no more than a summer breeze, fingers outstretched to draw a complex rune of warding over the breach. With a sigh of relief, the troop's shadow seer turned the ebbing gale of energy into a harmless, sparkling mist. Yvraine and her warriors regained the composure slowly, picking themselves up and regrouping. The entire altercation had taken no more than a Terran minute. They had lost several of their number in the fighting, but without the intervention of the Harlequins, they would almost certainly have died. Yvraine scanned the thinning mist for movement, intending to thank her enigmatic saviors. Only one of them, the solitaire, could she see. That lone warrior had sensed something potent beyond measure in Yvraine. After a brief exchange with his fellows, he chose to remain as her guide. The others vanished into the depths of the webway to meet with the living legend, a famed warrior matriarch whose part was yet to be played. Dire tidings for Bealtan. The Harlequins of the Midnight Sorrow were already league distant from Yvraine's vanguard by the time the solitaire led the travelers on into the labyrinth dimension. Their intended destination was deep in the realm mankind called the Ultima Segmentum, for their layered duel in the shattered crown of the Eldar's legacy. They made for Bealtan, a world ship that seeks to unite its disparate race in what others consider a lost cause. Craft world Bealtan, whose name translates as the rebirth of ancient days in the Eldar lexicon known to the savants of the Imperium of Man, is the most militant and proud of all its kind. Violently xenophobic and mistrustful of the lesser races, the vast world ship protects its holdings with a vengeful fury. Bealtan casts itself as the guardian of the Maiden Worlds, those primeval planets where the Eldar Exodites live in harmony with their environments, and upon the death, join with the world spirit of the planet itself. The bellicose people of Bealtan believe the Exodite worlds will be the seeds that nourish into a new order when the Eldar rise again to prominence. Many of the other craft worlds consider the Bealtani delusional. The resources and manpower needed to successfully turn those paradise planets into an echo of the former Eldar Empire were long ago consumed. Undeterred by these naysayers, the Bealtani cling to the convictions as a wounded warrior holds tightly onto his sword. Though few in Commorragh realized it, Bealtan was the original home of the one the Dark Eldar called Daughter of Shades. Under the world ship's glowing domes and elegant spears, Yvraine was raised, nurtured, and taught the ways of the craft worlds. At first, she walked the path of the performer, her intricate acrobatics thrilling high society as well as her fellow wanderers of the craft world's abandoned zones. Her displays grew faster and more violent as she became more headstrong. When the avatar of Ken was roused within the craft world's heart during the invasion of Gnosis Prime, she took the path of the warrior, becoming a dire avenger under the tutelage of the famously deadly Larian Starspeaker, exarch of the Silvered Blade Shrine. Long Terran years slit past. The blood Yvraine shed as part of Bealtan's famous sword-wind armed forces should have been enough to sate even the most savage spirit, but it was not enough. Restless, she sought a deeper connection to the infinite. For a time, the path of the warlock gave her the esoteric understanding she craved, honing her psychic skills whilst still giving her a chance to fight in Bealtan's armies. The witch path too she forsook, becoming an outcast, then a famed Eldar Corsair admiral, and finally, after her hubris led to mutiny, an arena fighter in Commorragh. Yet Bealtan has always had a place in her heart, and vice versa. With the solitaire she had encountered in the webway guiding her, the prodigal daughter's homecoming was close at hand. Bealtan's struggling ambition was well known. In Yvraine, the Mask of the Midnight Sorrow believed they had found a way to make that ambition a reality. The gladiatrix bore a peculiar aura, and the Shadow Seer had marked it well. Her use of deathly powers in the battle against the Demets had confirmed an eventuality foreseen by the troop's patron, Eldar. The crux point of causality had been exactly where the High Farseer had said it would be, and Yvraine had manifested power from beyond the veil just as foreseen. Her safe arrival to a sympathetic audience was paramount. As Eldar had said, the Harlequins must untangle the strands of fate that stretched before her if they were to be weaved into a greater thread, and ultimately become a silken noose strong enough to destroy Slaanesh. Months previous, secreted in vaults of black wraithbone within Craftworld Ulthwé, Eldar had foreseen much of that which was coming to pass. Following the ripples in the fabric of the future that he himself had caused upon the crystal moon of Coheria, he saw a new force rising, embodied in one called the Daughter of Shades. She alone held the key to Inad's ascension, and the cosmic upheaval Eldrad and Kaisadurus the Anchorite had long predicted. Pursuing Yvraine's thread of fate in his meditations, Eldar deemed that there was no haven more likely to take this living phenomenon into their heartlands than Bealtan. Even then, Eldar had seen the reborn gladiatrix and the ruling castes of the craft world bound together on an altogether deeper and more spiritual level. Another nexus point of destiny approached, the skein of fate knotted and tense around it. As he refined his divinations, Eldar had seen the rune of the Night Maiden circled by the fall from grace, both in turn orbiting the heraldic rune of Bealtan itself. Ominously, the stylized heart that Saturday within the craft world's iconic rune had smoldered and turned black. Such was the price of progress. The High Farseer had sent a psychic signal across the vastness of the webway, in doing so dispatching the only agents he could truly trust to work to a greater goal. So it was the Mask of the Midnight Sorrow had made haste through the webway to Bealtan, their intent to pave the way for Yvraine's arrival. Ildrashi Dreamspear performed an elaborate bow, his arms wide. The autarch millennial replied with a stylized salute. Both gestures were remarkably tense for warriors of such grace. With the Bealtani autarch we dire avengers, their weapons held lightly at the sides. Alongside Dreamspear, a dozen harlequins stood in exaggerated postures of relaxation. Unusual to arrive unheralded in such a fashion, said Millennial casually. Though it is perhaps the way of the Midnight Sorrow to embody the Void Zephyr, taking or leaving as they please. Uncommon for an armed escort to welcome ambassadors, said Dreamspear. In these dark days we all walk shadowed paths. As you say, nodded the autarch. Let us ensure they do not lead us astray. An act of provocation, such as Sigarach's theft of Fair Aisha's jewels, could be considered an act of open contempt. Provocation. Some say Sigarach's act was one of desperation, committed in pursuance of a greater victory, said Dreamspear. Of course. Though in times of war, lethal mistakes are made. Let us hope they do not lead to unnecessary tragedy in the final act. Only a fool is deaf to the words of a prophet. These words you speak of, said the autarch, turning to pinch the stem of a crystal rose and move it to catch the light, that they concern the god of the dead, perchance. Lanathrialle believes so. Indirectly, they do. They concern all of the Eldari, past, present, and future. But you, most of all, he said. Your people, and you. And so your troop, known defilers of the Dome of Crystal Seers, choose to breach a latter portal rather than obeying the unwritten codes. The autarch shifted his body language, speaking volumes. We had little choice. A core still dries on our blades. The children of she who thirsts already know of the daughter of shades. So you risk doom to force our hand, said the autarch. You are in danger only yourselves. They cannot penetrate the wards. No, no, laughed the Harlequin hollowly, his mask becoming the coal-eyed visage of Cain's avatar as he made the sign of the Black Key. They seek not to attack Bealtan directly, but via a threshold world. For there, a new tapestry of fate will unfold. And have your divinations told you which world the she-demons intend to breach? Said the autarch. By way of answer, the Harlequin reached out and opened the palm of his hand. The autarch looked down at the rune held there for a long moment before gesturing to his exarch. Gather the sword wind, informed Lanathrialle. We strike at dawn. He turned on his heel and left the audience chamber without a sound. Though the Mask of the Midnight Sorrow had lately garnered a reputation as self-centered thieves and bearers of ill tidings, the message they brought to Bealtan was of such dire import it could not be ignored. The autarch millennial consulted with the Craftworld's High Farseer, Lanathrialle, even as the Craftworld's aspect warrior war host, known as the Swordwind, was mobilized for war. Lanathrialle's own runic divination, when carefully interpreted with the Harlequin's message in mind, spoke of a baleful truth. Much like Eldrad, she saw a fork in the destiny of her people, one route leading to blazing fire, the sign of the Rana Dandra, the end of days, whilst the other led to a darkened veil and the sound of a mourning bell. The implications were staggering. Perhaps the whispered notion of Inad's ascension could stave off the Eldar's destruction for a time, and maybe even calm the warp storms ravaging the galaxy. The newcomer the Harlequin spoke of was central to this concept, bound tightly to the runes of the great enemy and Bealtan itself. It was likely the agents of Slaanesh who were aware of the importance of the interloper, this daughter of shades, and intended to seize her themselves. Until now, the runes of warding that protected the Craftworld had made the idea of a demonic incursion the stuff of nightmares, not reality. With Empyrean tempests raging across the segmentum, however, there was a chance of a webway breach. Should a host of warp spawn set foot upon the Craftworld, the sheer magnitude of the disaster that would follow did not bear thinking about. A full demonic invasion could see the Craftworld lying in ashes, never to recover. The Mask of Slaanesh was well aware of this opportunity. She had learned of a route of ingress to Bealtan, a long sealed webway tunnel that led from an abandoned extremity of the Craftworld to the gates of the Exodite maiden world <silence>otilla.